Let's call this meeting to order. Our first order of business is approval of the minutes, and I believe we have those from May available, not from April. So we're looking at the minutes from the May 9th meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
We need a motion first. You seconded.
I move
Okay.
to accept.
Member Wilbur moves. Member Werderbach seconds. Are there any questions, concerns, suggested amendments for the minutes? Okay, great. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Okay. The minutes are approved unanimously.
So we do have minutes from the April meeting.
Oh, we do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You just received them this afternoon.
Okay.
But I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. They're prepared for your review.
Thank you.
It took a long time to go through that.
I'm
meeting.
sure. I'm sure. I have not looked at them.
So there's nothing sunshine in them, right? So there were no motion. There was no official business. I suggest that we pass them pro forma and we're done with that instead of carrying them over to July.
Is that a thing we can do?
Is there a motion?
I move to accept them.
Commissioner
I'll move them.
Wilbur moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Sturkey second. All those in favor of approving the April minutes, let it know by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and move to our discussion items. The first item is item A, which is a work plan review. And here I just want to remind everyone of what's on deck and make sure that we have agreement between our schedules about what we're up to next. So at this meeting, we are visiting the arts and public ed part of our six basket system. And at our next meeting, we'll be looking at housing and neighborhoods. That's on July 11th. On August 8th, we'll be looking at commerce. And Lou, I want to give you a special heads up because you've done a lot of work on that.
Thank you. Okay.
And in September, on our meeting on the 12th, health and wellness is the topic. October 10th, is a kind of open meeting where we're going to see where things stand and what needs more attention. Discuss some of the findings from the Thinking About Race Thursdays. We need to start thinking ahead about what we might do on Indigenous Peoples Day, which is the 10th of October. Then in November, we'll talk about the future of this committee's work. And what our recommendations are going to be about a systemic way to carry on this work. And by December, we hope to have a finalized report to vote on publicly. That will be on the 12th. So I just want to pause and ask if that accords with everyone's recollection of our work plan, if there's any questions or concerns.
There was also mention of a chief diversity officer to coincide with the future of committee meeting.
That's on that's kind of covered in the systemic look at the future of the work of the committee. That's one possible option.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You had that for November, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just would add that we may want to enter into the record that according to the resolution, a recommendation would have needed to come out of this meeting, out of the June meeting, if this body, particularly these folks here, if we needed to extend our terms beyond the December 2022 deadline. It doesn't seem like that's the will of the group, at least from previous conversations and discussions, but we can open that up at this time if we'd like. Hearing none, I'm ready to proceed.
Okay. The next item here, events debrief. This is just an opportunity for us to reflect in a public meeting about some of the event work we've been doing or participating in. We had a meeting with an expert on Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, Professor Colleen Murphy. That's one event I can think of. So I have two questions. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share or reflect on from that experience? And are there other events that I'm missing?
I'd just like to add, I think emphasize what we said before, that, and I think it's here in the notes as well, that having scholarly guidance on the direction for TRC work, I think, is critical. It appears to be a developing and unfolding kind of discipline, and having some scholarly input on a regular basis, in my view, will, I think, help us enormously.
I concur. I thought that was a really impactful meeting with her, and I expected to learn a lot from her, but I think my expectations were exceeded. Any events I'm neglecting here?
Just want to circle back on Colleen Murphy that she will be doing, she's slated to do a public event with us in October. So we would need to formalize that date, which is, I think, the second Thursday in October. And what other sort of programming pieces do we want to put around that? Would you rather that not be on a council night? that was about.
Well, October is going to creep up fast, so do we want to set a goal of having her travel arrangements and things finalized by our August meeting? And then having a marketing plan by our September meeting?
That sounds good. Did we want a couple of people to drive that?
Absolutely, we do. Is anyone feeling it?
I kind of want to think a little bit about Mayor Schultz's Grimace and the fact that it's a cool event. And normally our thinking about race is for 1 hour on that second Thursday from 6 to 7. And then it allows people to get to Borough Council. Is this something that we want to consider an alternate day for if members of council actually want to come?
I think that would be a good idea. I could see some wanting to attend.
I could follow up with Raph on that because I have to follow up with him on some other things. So I could follow up with him on the logistics and date for that.
If for some reason you're very locked into that, and there are a number of council members who want to attend, of course I'd like to attend. Otherwise, I would have grimaced. But we rarely do this, but we could move our meeting too if that's the only option that evening.
When you say move, you mean move date or move location?
Move date. I don't know where you intend to have this meeting located.
We thought about
Colin
Second
Murphy.
Prez's community room just
Okay.
because it was just easy to make happen. Of course, it doesn't have to be there.
Right. Yeah, the location's obviously not as important as far as the conflict as the time is. So we could potentially. It just takes a lot of logistics to move our meeting to a different date. Finding the right time to do that.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Thank you, Tawanda, for following up on those details. Let's touch back in about that at our July meeting too, just because working with smaller numbers here, and we're in an all hands on deck situation. So we'll kind of do a check in and make sure that you have the support you need. Let's see here. If there's nothing else, we're on to item C, public art and education candidate recommendations, expert identification and work assignments. We ready?
Okay, so Raz and I have been working and meeting on these baskets, if you will. Now, it's important to note that it's still a work in progress, so there are still some changes that we would like to make. But I'll just go over some of the recommendations that we've come up with thus far. So the first being that the borough should create two positions, volunteer positions, in order to create kind of a way for faculty and students in the Carlisle Area School District to communicate and also to know what's going on with the borough. So we're looking to operate for those two people to operate as liaisons between the Carlisle Area School District and Borough Council. And so those liaisons should be encouraged to attend council meetings, report back to groups that exist at school. I know we have but a few political organizations at school, clubs and whatnot. And I think that there's a great opportunity, just for some dialogue to occur. It's also an opportunity for the youth to be heard, which is something I've really been championing for a while. For the second recommendation, the borough should establish or partner an existing educational body to educate community members on topics of racial injustice, and discrimination and their efforts. One of the things that Raz and I talked about is, it is difficult to really ask people to unload their trauma. So if we could, we would love to work with not only the educational bodies, but also some professionals in the community or outside of the Carlisle community to help us come up with ways to get people to feel comfortable unloading their trauma, if you will. The education part, of course, is also key. Just talking about the types of bias and how we can work to change that. Recommendation 3, the Carlisle Borough should partner with local Indigenous representatives to understand how to better commemorate Indigenous culture and educate the public on the complicated and troubling past relationship, obviously related to the Carlisle Indian School. We did not want to come up with recommendations on our own. We wanted to really look to the local Indigenous representatives so that they could give their input and give their ideas as to how they would like to be included. We want to hear their voice. We don't want to be their voice. Next, of course, we have the arts and public education recommendation, number 4. When commissioning projects involving art, music, literature, or culture, we would like to really incorporate DEI and B. And that belonging part we did add because that really is key to diversity, equity, and inclusion, that belonging part, making community members feel as if they have a place here and they're accepted here and their culture is appreciated here. And one way that we talked about doing that is by having community events that truly reflect various interests, music, different literature, art, because right now we are not seeing that. And I think we could also really look at location as well. I know right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, with the music that takes place at Thornwall Park, is that correct? We could even look at maybe some other locations in order to make it more accessible for community members, maybe to get a different or an additional crowd out there, and an opportunity for people to meet and greet who would otherwise not do so without being in the same, place and space. So that's kind of where we are at this point. Any questions? Comments, concerns, additions, any of those things?
I do have an addition. Someone got in touch with me about a Mellon Foundation grant for communities, and I want to share a little bit about this, and I think it resonates with a lot of what you were saying about your conversations with Raz. It's called the Humanities in Place program, and I'll just say a little bit about this, and you all can Google it later. Humanities in Place supports a fuller, more complex telling of American histories and lived experiences by deepening the range of how and where our stories are told, and by bringing a wider variety of voices into the public dialogue. Working with media, heritage and public spaces, history museums and other institutions, and conveners of shared experiences, including the digital or ephemeral, we strive to expand the public expression of the histories that have made us and the values we hold. Our program works across and within diverse communities, encouraging bold, innovative rethinking of past practice, as well as visionary new approaches for how to collectively understand, uplift, and celebrate more complete stories about who we are. How we do this, they outline a few different strategies, but the gist of their strategies is they bring together stakeholders in a community. The money is pretty big. If you look at some of these communities, they have exemplar proposals that have been funded. Some of them do concern Indigenous memorializations, and I think that we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. This is something where, what would our commission's recommendation be? Our commission's recommendation might be that the borough bring together the Cumberland Historical Society, some other people, the Coalition of Natives and Allies, to put a grant proposal together. And then that would be a way of synthesizing these different strands into one cohesive project that could go for, some of these are over $1 million projects.
I love that idea. Thank you. I'm on the site now and it looks amazing.
That's the Humanities in Place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We also have a monuments project, which might be really good for the Lincoln Cemetery area.
The tip I got was this one.
Really? I think another recommendation, or to add to maybe number 4, maybe some specific language about the borough crest and that process.
Also a great idea. Thank you.
This is great, very comprehensive.
Is there an expert we might want to bring in to talk to us about this? Like, might we look at some of these exemplary proposals and maybe invite someone who was successful in bringing this together for a Zoom conversation or something like that? How might we go about identifying an expert to help us?
Raz and I have talked about that, so we're still kind of having discussions. So we will certainly get back to you with a list of names. We also want to take advantage of, the people in this community as well. Maybe bring in and invite, the superintendent, assistant superintendent, make them more aware of our work in terms of having, student and staff representatives come in, and just have them listen and think about how we can really incorporate or have a partnership in order to, keep students involved, get them to vote, get them to interact, be a part.
I think, and sort of something that I like is that it feeds us some of the other recommendations. So when I think about the future work of a body like this or a CDO, we had some conversations about um, relationships between borough government and the school district, right? And I see um, that first recommendation as being a way of these are one of the ways that would look, or this might be one of the outcomes of a more intentional um, cooperative effort.
And Miss Wilbur, also being able to reach out to maybe even Dickinson College. I hate to go directly to the Dickinson Democrats that I already know, like for it to be, I guess, equally represented, but there is some opportunity there to kind of lead the way with the high school level at the college level instead. They're always willing to help out.
There's a liaison currently from Dickinson College.
From both the college and the law school.
Thank you. I'm taking note.
Let's see, the other item here is work assignments. Are you and Raz feeling well supported? Are there do you need more folks to help or things you want to assign, or you're still kind of digesting?
I think we're still digesting and working through in terms of time and feeling as if we have enough information. I think we feel that the information that we have thus far is sufficient, but we also feel comfortable reaching out to any of you if we have questions or, so.
Glad to hear it. Any other questions, comments, concerns, additions on item 3C?
I have nothing on 3C, but just wanted to circle back to 3A if we could on the work plan, and just for us to keep in mind that the budget is done once a year, and by the time we give our recommendations in formal fashion, we may not be able to get anything in the budget. If we have an idea of maybe some things that we might be interested in, whether that's a staff position or anything that might have a dollar amount to it, if we can get a general gist of what that might look like and pass that information off sooner rather than later, we stand a better chance of not waiting an entire year before it's able to be considered, at least from a financial standpoint. So just wanted to throw that out there. They usually start working on the budget, I think. Well, you let some people tell it. They never really stop working on the budget. But I would say if maybe by August we would have an idea of what some dollar items might be. Then I'll ask for Mayor Schultz to give us updates from council and from staff.
Sure, and I can just piggyback on what was just discussed. August, I would say August or September would be ideal for that. And to give those of you who aren't familiar with the process a little additional background on that, it was a great summary of it. And staff does say they never stop. I think they take a couple month break, and then they're almost working on next year's budget. We do have a couple. There are a couple pots of money that would primarily be dealing with initiatives coming from this body. One is the general fund, and that's tied to really primarily to our real estate tax that we pass at the end of each year, and that's the one that's really time sensitive, because we have to have, if there needs to be a change in revenue to fund whatever may be recommended, among all the other things that there may be a change in revenue for. We need to know that by the August-September timeframe, because then we have our staff is kind of finalizing the budget draft in October, and then council discusses it during budget meetings in November, and then we vote on the budget in December. The other pot of money that hasn't been allocated whatsoever is the American Recovery Plan funds, and those are funds that obviously aren't tied to any ongoing revenue source here at the borough, and that's about $9 million total. Not that you're going to spend all $9 million from this commission, although I'm sure you could think of $9 million worth of things that would be great to do. But there is that, we have more flexibility in that. So if there are things that make sense to be funded sooner than budget year 2024, that might not have quite made it to be ripe enough by September, there are those funds available too, if it makes sense to use those funds for that purpose. Oops.
Can I just push back on that a little bit? Would the sustainability then be our responsibility to prove?
The sustainability of the...
So if we came up with a recommendation and it finds its way to ARPA funds, would you be then looking for this body to provide some sustainability plan for it, since it's not necessarily tied to revenue?
And I wouldn't spend a lot of time on that. I mean, if there's some low-hanging fruit that you can identify, that's great. But I think what you're doing is you're providing recommendations to council, and then it's our job to take a look at things and decide how, when we can implement it, how we can sustain it.
Nicole, did you get that? Because I'm...
And I actually think, because I listened to that retreat meeting several times, there was a point where Co-Chair Callahan mentioned maybe this body looking, making some sort of budgetary considerations. What can the borough really afford? I think that can be in the background of your thoughts. I wouldn't expect you to do that kind of the deep dive that's necessary to really work that out. So I wouldn't get too obsessed with that. You tell us what you think we need to do, and then it's going to be our job to figure out how we make it happen. Just a couple other things. Really, one, we had our goal planning session at our workshop about 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago. And there are 3 goals that are working their way through the process now that would be relevant to this group. One came from Councilor Perry, whose goal was support for Black-owned businesses, as examples, building space, grant funding, mentoring programs, youth interns to build websites, manage social media for businesses. And then 2 that came from me, and the first was to identify 1 or more downtown area retail or commercial spaces for the borough to acquire by rent or ownership to rent to pop-up businesses owned by entrepreneurs of color. That's actually, this and the next one came from a conference I think I've mentioned a couple times in these meetings, and has been effective elsewhere. If I haven't mentioned it before, right after I came back from that conference, I actually had a business owner of color interested in having a pop-up store just to sort of test the waters in Carlisle, and we don't have any kind of program like that. So I was trying to help her identify landlords that might be able to make some short-term lease work. we couldn't find anything for her. Put her in touch with a number of resources. She wound up in Mechanicsburg. But so there's an opportunity for us to help develop retail, commercial business downtown, and opportunities for people of color. Second was to explore programs and opportunities intended to improve investment equity among businesses of color. So there's I've sort of preached this before, and you all know there's this wealth gap that we need to address. And there are programs out there and models out there that we could use to close that gap. So next steps right now for these goals, among all the other goals that the council had outlined, is staff's going back and determining the feasibility and timeline that would be necessary to implement those goals. That should come back to us at our July workshop meeting, so I should have more to report on where those stand next month at this meeting. And that is all I have.
Thank you. Can I, before I forget it, connect the 3 goals to a homework assignment for next time? So we're on deck to talk about housing in neighborhoods, and I don't think we have anybody assigned to do that work yet.
No, Raz and I.
Are doing housing in neighborhoods
Yes,
too.
we are.
Wow. Okay. Doing it all. Great. I have figure out later in my notes, but I guess we figured it out. That's great news. Might we consider a sort of downtown revitalization retail space thing part of the neighborhoods element of that? Downtown is certainly a neighborhood, and that way we're kind of tying up this thing that the council is bringing forward with our work.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I see that as a commerce thing.
A lot of things are many things are a lot of things are multiple things.
Yeah.
That's okay to have overlap.
I'm just wondering if that's something that Lou might be interested in
Yes,
pursuing.
because of the overlap, yeah, I concur. If you would want the assistance, yeah, I would like to help participate with that. Because like we said in our previous meetings, there's lots of overlap here. So we want to use our resources, our limited resources, well. So I'll help in any way possible. Sure, thanks.
Did you talk about the third one yet? So you're about to do that? Oh.
Go ahead.
No, go for it. Okay. Well, I think that's commerce too. So I think the recruiting the investment piece is I see that as being is tied to the commerce piece also.
I see everything is interconnected. That's why the metaphor of a basket's being used, and I don't see any harm in multiple subgroups working on things that ultimately overlap. So I'm just less comfortable saying that's definitely commerce. I think it's both.
I love a good both and.
So to add, and I guess this would go with commerce as well, at least with the business community. I've been having some discussions with young people who are ready to get their first jobs. And they're 15, 16, and some are hitting a brick wall, to use a cliche. So I'd like us to also, if we can, add that to one of the baskets. So interestingly enough, I had a few kids say, children of color, say that they applied to certain businesses and did not get any callbacks. So I have to say what I did, because of what I do is I mentored them through the process. You walk in, introduce yourself, do the application, complete the application legibly, etc. Extend your hand, follow up, and there's a lot of perception here, and I understand that, but we had some kids who never received a call back, and they've never seen, to their knowledge, students of color working in certain businesses and not feeling as if they receive an opportunity to work in those businesses. And so that was just kind of a conversation that I've had, and I'll continue working, obviously, with children, young adults, I should say, on that.
If I may ask, yes. Again, I'm not thoroughly familiar, but there used to be something called the Carlisle Employment Agency years ago. And as a youth, all you had to do was go down, give your name, age, and the type of work that you might be interested in, and you would get a call, not to go to a business, to go for an interview, something of that sort. Does a process like that still exist here in the borough? I mean, I'm dating myself on that, but is there something that we have in place that could just get some enhancement? Or
There's still employment skills. So that may be maybe it morphed into that agency after your time here previously. So there are. I'm not sure all of the services they may provide, but they may provide something similar to that.
So CareerLink was also a provider of those services, but because they've restructured those RFPs, and they now go to businesses outside of the Commonwealth even as contracts, and they hire people to administer that program or something similar to it. So it's really it's a miss. It's something that's not happening, that used to happen, that could be happening a lot better if there was state legislation in place that would give it back to the local folks.
So if I may ask, that's also very helpful. Thank you. That's very helpful. If a youth, let's say, and I'm going to say 15, 16, that age, came to me and said, "Hey, Lou, I'm looking for a job. Where should I go? I'm willing to do almost anything." What would be a intelligent and useful answer that I might give this youth? Is there a one-stop shop, a single point where they would go, or do they literally have to beat the pavement and ask for a summer job? Is there a certain place I could direct them here in the borough? Do we have anything like that at all, or no?
So it should be CareerLink.
Should be.
It should be. But because that RFP just ended and was awarded to a new vendor, and that new vendor is not in place. So the State Workforce Investment Board gives them some latitude in being able to set up shop and get established. And then kids go without services normally for that entire summer.
You know, in some of these jobs back then, and again, this was year round. It wasn't just for the summer.
Mhm.
So, shoveling snow, cutting grass, all kinds of different things that weren't even necessarily real jobs per se, but it was employment, and it was compensated, and it was for youth. And was just wondering, we appear maybe we've morphed. It's morphed into something else, and we might have lost some of the grassroots pieces of it. Yes, maybe.
Yes.
So okay.
I can tell you that through the school district, we do prepare students. I'd say both on an individual basis as well as, through class instruction as to how to fill out applications, interview, code switch, if you will, use, a professional language. So that is done. But in terms of a certain place at the school where they can go to find out what summer jobs are available, that I don't think I've ever seen. It's pretty much word of mouth.
Yeah. Well, I'll just foot stomp that. This group knows very well the idle hands issue. When folks feel they don't have anything to do. And it links to a number of other issues that the borough is grappling with, like crime and drugs and all other kinds of things that happen bad. So if we could do something here, I'll make a note of it certainly for the commerce area. But I feel ill-equipped at this point. If a youth did come and ask me and say, "Hey, look, I want to get a job. I'll do anything. I want some work. What could I do?" I don't know where to tell the person to go. It makes me feel very inadequate. But it sounds like to me that would be what we used to call I won't say that in the military, SAC salute, Strategic Air Command salute. I don't know. And those kinds of answers are not very helpful to certainly our young people. So if there's something that we could do, something I could do, something this group could do, I'll do some more research, see if there is something else. But we should have something like that in place.
And Ms. Wilbur, when you said that they had come to you or you had given some basic kind of tips as to how to procure some kind of employment, did you say that they weren't getting any kind of breakthrough or follow-up after you'd spoken to them?
So I'll be very blunt. So there were a couple of places in which some young men, some of 15 and 16, went to the businesses that hire 15 and 16-year-olds, mostly 15. They went to apply for the job, did everything correctly. They never got a call back, and so of course I said, so you call, gave them the script. They did everything. I was present. For some other kids, I was not present, but they still did it. Come to find out, two young ladies, white young ladies, who did less than that after the boys had applied for the job, they're now working there. That speaks volumes. So looking at this not only through an adult's eyes, but I think looking at it through a young black male's eyes, 15, 16 years old of age, what does that say? That says a lot. And so I promised them that I would do what I could to look into it, because we do have wonderful young kids of color, 15, 16, who want to work, who want the opportunity. We need businesses to work with us, to be willing to provide those opportunities, especially when they have a help wanted sign clearly posted outside of their businesses.
Thank you for that clarification.
There's at least two issues here.
Yes.
I mean, obviously the injustice and the lack of clarity about what went on there, and I'm not sure how much we're in a position to do about that. And then there's the issue of needing to generate meaningful employment opportunities for minoritized and marginalized youth. And I'm reminded of something I participated in as a young person that's was based on funding kind of like the American Recovery Plan funds. I participated in a summer employment program that was designed to promote knowledge of municipal government and community engagement. And it took a bunch of money, and it gave 15 and 16-year-olds jobs working in different municipal and county offices and some agencies that were connected to that work, designated funds. The applications were reviewed by a commission put together like this sort of commission, with an eye to the criteria being about, at that time it was civic engagement. But we could do something where we make a recommendation about a use of these funds to start a summer employment program that would really expose youth to the wheels of government and how municipalities run.
Yeah. Yes, I think that is something that we might explore. Again, in my limited conversations with youth around that age, 13, 14, 15, 16, many are, when you ask, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? The big stuff. I want to be an entrepreneur. And that's where the seriousness of the conversation ends, because then after that, clearly they're not equipped. They haven't given it much thought other than I want to be something, an entrepreneur. And in many cases, they don't see the investment here in the borough. They want to do it on their own, like in virtual space or something like that, not necessarily the brick and mortar that I'm used to. And I don't hear any discussions about investing in the community. It's sort of, I want to do this for myself, as if I'm on my own. And there's really not many people other than my family and friends that really care. So something like you're talking about, which I think is an excellent idea, would sort of also have that community involvement flavor to it, investment in the community. Plus, it's work. So you're getting compensation. The work you're doing is helping the community that you're in. And not everyone can be an entrepreneur on their own. We already know the statistics for that. It just doesn't work that way. But the young folks, they dream and they deserve the right to dream. We all did. But we need to be there. So I do like the idea, particularly in what you said about the public service part of it, the government part, because that goes to the investment in the community and also goes to trust in that there are authorities that care and that they wield the power and the influence to help you, as opposed to just being on your own. And those guys over there, they're sort of the enemy. I'm fighting against them, against the tide. So I really like that idea.
And my father always points to his experience as a really young guy in Pittsburgh, that there were always summer programs like that where there's an awful lot of work to be done in clearing fields and painting curbs in a town like that. So, excuse my ignorance for now, but does something like that already exist in Carlisle? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure how, with the pandemic, I'm not sure how much of it was going on. But the curb painting, I know we've had youth in the past involved in that. I was just about to text the borough manager to see if she could give me a quick update on where those things stand. But there have been some opportunities for youth. It's not widespread, but it might be enough for a couple of jobs for a couple of 15-year-olds.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
And I'd also like to add through the school district, and I know we're getting close to time, so I won't belabor the point, but through the school district, we have the Career Technology Education Center. Well, that allows businesses to offer internships to Carlisle students. They can actually go to school for the first half of the day, and then they can, if they have transportation or with a buddy, they can then go to a business and work half day. So we could work with the school district, because one of the things that I've been really pushing is to get more students of color involved in that program, because right now there simply aren't enough. Yes, it meets the minimum, but we want to go beyond the minimum and equip our students.
Just to go back to the curb painting, that's something that has been done, quite a few summers, as long as I've been here. And I haven't really seen a lot of black or brown youth participating in that program historically. You can't go back and fix, the past, but I do wonder with that assessment or inquiry as to where that program is now, if there is some way that we can ensure that youth that are in most need of an opportunity are provided with that opportunity, and we are able to remove any barriers or obstacles if there are.
And I would encourage us to think beyond curb and weed whacking and that sort of thing. The program I was describing and that I participated in, one year I worked for the inspection department, and I learned all about building inspections and codes and filing and how you send a citation out and appearing in court and all of that. And another time I worked for the township supervisor and taught line dancing to the elderly and led crafts. So there's a whole range of different types of things that we might think about.
And just to kind of piggyback on Mr. Liu's idea there, I think there also needs to be some accountability to somebody along our lines. They'd be able to check in with us and the importance of showing up right on time. Excuse me. The importance of showing up, and they'd be accountable to somebody other than that employer, so that, like Ms. Wilbur says, there is that kind of tutelage and guidance. A lot of these kids have never had a job before, so it would be very important for them to have that kind of somebody like us to check in with, to know that you need to be there, and we'd like to follow up so nobody's getting embarrassed. And I'd love to be a part of that. Because I started working for the Carlisle Fairgrounds when I was 14, picking up trash. And they're always hiring.
I think you were younger than that.
No,
Pretty sure.
no, officially 14.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of different things going on, but they're not kind of woven together and united under one kind of thing. So maybe a kind of recommendation we might make is a kind of youth opportunity task force or somebody to look at pulling all of this together and researching how deep the problem is. So this is great. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right. Next on the agenda is public comment. Community members are asked to give their name and address for the record and to keep their comments to 3 to 5 minutes. Seeing no one here in Borough Hall. Stephanie, do we have anyone on Zoom?
Nobody's raised their hand.
Fantastic. Announcements and future meeting schedule. Our next meeting will be Monday, July 11th. I won't be here. We can talk about that on 6 o'clock p.m. right here at Borough Hall, 53 West South Street. Doesn't look like there are any other announcements. Does anyone have anything else that they would like to share? I'll just share that it's Juneteenth weekend coming up. Hope that we're all able to find something that is commemorative and memorable and impactful as we remember that most sacred time.
With that, I think this meeting is adjourned.